Hi everyone, welcome back to Living Traditions Homestead. Well, it is nearing the end of November. Next week is Thanksgiving. Now is the time of year when my focus changes significantly. All of a sudden, I feel a strong desire to make broth, to render fat into usable fat that I can use for cooking throughout the year. And I really scrutinize what is in our freezers and what can be changed into a more shelf-stable format. Today I'm specifically talking about ground pork or ground pork sausage. I have found over the years that pork is the meat that gets freezer burned or tastes freezer burned the fastest. So it is one of the first things in the fall that I feel like I need to get out of the freezer and into either jars or into the freeze dryer so that they have been turned into something that's more shelf stable and to prevent kind of a turn in their flavor. As I was looking in the freezers to determine what to start first, I noticed that we still have 6 pounds of ground pork. And ground pork is really the first thing to start tasting freezer burned. So I brought all 6 pounds of that into the house. They have been thawing in the refrigerator for a couple of days. And today I'm gonna start really clearing out the freezers, starting with ground pork. I have realized that over the years of me doing canning videos, I have never done a canning video of any ground meat. So I figured this is a perfect opportunity to bring this kind of canning lesson to you guys and check off one of the items on my to-do list and get this ground pork into a format that is a little bit more shelf stable. Now my intention with this canned ground pork is to use it in a family favorite recipe this winter. We call it Polish noodle soup. It is really a tomato-based soup that has sausage of some sort in it and then lots of vegetables. Really the star of the soup is the sausage meat. And then we will make a Polish noodle, which is really like a dumpling, a drop dumpling into the soup. And it just makes a really wonderful, hearty soup for the middle of the winter. These 6 pounds of ground pork I'm thinking will probably turn into 4 or 5 quarts of meat, which is going to be perfect for a soup starter. This meat, along with all non-acidic foods, needs to be pressure canned. Now, I know that that is a very intimidating canning method for a lot of people. Now, I assure you that once you learn how to pressure can, you will understand that it is not as dangerous as people fear. People think that their whole houses are gonna blow up. They've heard some scary stories from their grandmas or their great aunts. But I promise you that pressure canning is safe and you can learn how to do it safely as well. A long time ago, probably 4 or 5 years ago, I did a very in-depth canning video about how to pressure can and why it's not dangerous and the changes that have been made to pressure canners that we use these days in comparison to the pressure canners that were used by our grandmas and our great grandmas. So I will put a link to that video in here, but also in the description below, so that if you are worried about it, you can watch that video and you'll never have fear of pressure canning again. All of this ground meat needs to be cooked before we can start canning, so we're gonna take it all out of the tubes and get started. Before the meat has started really cooking very much at all, I'm actually gonna be turning this ground meat into sausage by using this Legs custom blended seasoning flavor packet called Pork Sausage Seasoning, blend number 6. Now, I'll be honest that I prefer their Italian seasoning, their Italian sausage seasoning, but I'm out. So I'm gonna be using this pork sausage seasoning. We have 3 pounds of meat in here. For every pound of meat, I'm going to add 1 tablespoon of the sausage seasoning. So 3 tablespoons in this batch, and I'll do the same for the next batch. And then we're just gonna work this into the meat as it browns. Now I'm confident that y'all know how to brown meat in a pan. So I'm gonna go ahead and get this all browned and then move on to the second batch. The only info that I'm going to add here is that I would like the end product to be kind of bigger chunks of ground meat, not super tiny chunks of ground meat. I feel like that cans better. The last time I canned ground meat, it was teeny tiny little pieces, and at the end of the canning process, it ended up being like one solid chunk of ground meat, and I want it to be more like loose. So I'm hopefully going to brown this in a way that allows the pieces to be kind of bigger. I hope that makes sense. Before I get too far into today's canning project, I want to thank the sponsor of today's video. Kevin and I understand that not everyone has the opportunity to grow and raise a lot of food, but so many people still want to eat healthy meals. In addition to this, everyone is so busy. It is tempting to save time by going through a drive-thru or buying frozen meals from the grocery store. We've been looking out for products to send your way and found CookUnity. We tried it out to see if it would be a quick and healthy alternative to share with our viewers. This meal here is actually a salad, so it doesn't even require any heating. It is a kale salad with herb marinated chicken from Chef Fabio Viviani. You can see on the label here a list of all of the amazing ingredients. You can even scan the QR code to learn more about your meal and about your chef. This kale salad that I had was so fresh tasting. It had the most tender kale I have ever eaten. The chicken pieces were real breast pieces, and the quinoa in there was perfectly cooked. And it actually had a pesto dressing that rivaled my own homemade pesto. Ingredients are really important to me and Kevin as we continue to live a low-carb lifestyle. CookUnity offers many options for all types of eating plans, and they also offer a ton of variety. They are made with whole food ingredients and are created by award-winning chefs. If you also have a busy life but still want to eat healthy meals, you don't want to go and pick up a pizza or go to the frozen food section of your grocery store, please know that each CookUnity meal is created by some of the best chefs in the country. CookUnity is offering 50% off of your first order to all of our viewers. Just click the link in the description below and use our discount code LivingTradition50. I want to thank CookUnity for sponsoring today's video and for creating some really amazing gourmet, healthy, ready-to-eat meals. Again, you can find the link in the description of this video and use the discount code LivingTradition50 for 50% off your first order. Okay, this first batch is all browned, so I'm just going to take it out of this pan, put it into another bowl, and then we'll get started on the second batch. So this is the 3 pounds and of sausage now, because we added the sausage mix. And so after this, we're going to put the last 3 pounds in, brown that up, and then we can get started canning. Again, I'm going to be adding sausage seasoning to the ground meat and then working that in as it browns. I'm adding 1 tablespoon per pound, so 3 tablespoons. I'm just going to work that right into the meat, and it will flavor it so nicely. I do this so often. All right, this second batch is done. I'm actually just going to dump the first batch into the second batch. I have 7 quart jars ready. I have no idea how many this is going to make, but we will find out. So the first step in canning this ground sausage, pork sausage, is complete. Let's move this over to the counter, the island, and we can work on the next step. Earlier, before I started filming, I took out my smallest Presto canner and filled it with the appropriate amount of water that I'll need. I think it's 2 quarts, but inside the Presto canners, there are like little notches on the inside of the metal that tell you how much water to put in there. So I filled it up. I put a little dash, or a couple glugs actually, of white vinegar that will help prevent hard water deposits from settling on the outside of the jars when we're done. I put that all in there ahead of time. And then I also put in 7-quart jars in here. I turned the heat on like medium-low to get everything heated up. I'm keeping my jars in there so that they are hot when we fill them. Also, I got a pretty big, I think this is a 2-gallon stock pot of water. I already brought that up to a boil. I'm going to put that back on the stove top, getting heated up again to a boil. That's what we will need to backfill the jars of the ground meat. We'll use this to backfill them, and then we can put the jars into the canner. So let's get set up for canning, because really, ground meat is like super easy to can. Okay, well, we are all set up to get canning. Let me go over all the things that we are going to be using today while we go through the canning process. The first thing is we have all of our ground meat in here. I've covered it up so that it stays warm. We're also going to need some hot water. Now, this was boiling, and then I turned it down just a little bit, but it's very, very hot. An alternative to using water in this situation would be broth. I would recommend, either beef broth, pork broth, venison broth, but you could also use tomato juice. And in this situation for me, tomato juice would have been wonderful because the soup I'll be using this in is tomato based. So it would be perfect, but I just don't have enough tomato juice this year. We will also be using a couple different kinds of spoons. We'll be using a funnel. This is a stainless steel funnel, which I really love. This will measure the head space of each jar. It's kind of like a measuring tool. Sometimes I call this a gapper. We are going to be using canning rings, which are right here, and canning lids, which I have simmering on the stove in some hot water. Today I'm going to be using lids from the company 4 Jars. They recommend that you simmer your lids before using them. Make sure that they're clean. This is a little bit different than I've been teaching for the last couple of years with a different brand of canning lids, where they just recommend that you wash them and then use them clean and not heated. But the 4 Jars company is recommending that you simmer them and use them warm. I'll be using like a magnet tool to pick up the warm canning lids from the water. I will also be using a clean, damp towel, which I am going to just dip some white vinegar on this towel. I'm just going to squish this around a little bit so that the vinegar is distributed throughout this damp towel. The reason why I am using vinegar this time, and a lot of times you don't see me use vinegar on the damp towel, is because this meat has some grease or some oil on it, and this vinegar on this damp towel is going to help get that grease off of the rim of the jar. So that's why we're doing it this time. Also, I have a jar lifter, which we will be using as well. The last thing, and I have not mentioned, are the jars. So I have 7-quart jars here. They are warming up inside of my pressure canner. Like I said, I already have the water and a little bit of vinegar in my pressure canner. I've been keeping the jars hot in here until I need them. I have 7 of them, so I'm just going to take these out. This is the jar we will start with. All right, let's get started with the canning process. We are going to fill our jar with the ground meat until it is about 1 inch from the top of the jar. So that is called 1 inch headspace. But we are going to give a generous 1 inch of headspace. So that means a little bit more than 1 inch. I'm going to jostle this around a little bit. I'm not going to pack it down, but I'm just going to jostle it to allow the meat to kind of settle a little bit. That is perfect. Using the canning funnel, I am going to backfill with this super hot water. This was boiling water. It's just about boiling now. We're just going to backfill until this water gets up to also the generous 1 inch headspace mark. We're almost there. I'm going to say that is good enough. One thing I forgot to mention is that I like to use a chopstick to poke down in the jars to get any of the air bubbles out of there. Okay, now I'm going to check the headspace. Remember, we're going for a little bit over 1 inch of a headspace. Using this measuring tool, I will look and see where the 1 inch mark is here. I will go in here and I will measure it. That is a little bit more than 1 inch headspace. So that is absolutely perfect. Now I'm going to take my vinegar moistened rag. I'm going to clean off the rim of the jar to make sure that the lid seals properly. I'm going to grab a hot lid here, put it on top just like that, hold it with my finger, and then I'm going to put on a ring. I'm going to tighten it finger tight and then transfer it to the pressure canner with this jar lifter. Let's do that again. Fill the jar with meat. Backfill with water. We're going to get rid of the air bubbles by using a chopstick. Check the headspace. Looks good. Add the lid and a ring, finger tight, and put it in the pressure canner. We are going to follow the same process until all of the meat is gone. Well, the 6 pounds of ground pork made just over 4 quarts of canned meat. So I'm going to equally distribute the 4 quarts within my pressure canner. It doesn't need to be full. It will be fine. I'm going to put on the lid. Seal that up. I'm going to turn on the heat. I like to start at about medium-high. Now we are waiting for this pressure canner to heat up until you see steam coming out of this center hole here. Once it starts coming out here, you want to set a timer for 10 minutes. That allows the temperature and the pressure to start building inside of there. After 10 minutes, we will put on the weight here. Now this weight that we have here comes in several different weights. When it is just plain, just like this, this signifies 5 pounds of pressure. When we add one of these rings, that signifies 10 pounds of pressure. Now, most people in most locations will pressure can their food at 10 pounds of pressure. But because of our elevation, it's above 1,000 feet above sea level, we need to process ours at 15 pounds of pressure. So there's another weight that we put on that signifies 15 pounds of pressure. Now, once this pressure canner reaches 15 pounds of pressure inside of it, this weight will start rocking back and forth. That's when we know that it has reached the right temperature and we can set our timer. Now, meat is the most kind of risky ingredient to pressure can. It is definitely a low acid food. So pressure canning meat in quarts will take 90 minutes of processing time. If we were going to be using pints, we would process them for 75 minutes. So once this starts rocking back and forth, I will set the timer for 90 minutes, and that is how long it will take to pressure can this ground meat. Well, this pressure canner finished processing right before our live stream. It came down to 0 pressure afterwards, and you guys, I was just too tired to film it after the live stream and before bed. So I do want to review with you all that happened and the steps afterwards. So after this processes for the full 90 minutes, because we did quarts, you'll turn off the heat and allow this to come down to 0 pressure. You'll know it has reached that because this little thing here will fall down just like that. That is when you know it is safe to open your pressure canner, but there's one thing that you want to do before you just open the lid, and that is take off the weight. You'll want to remove this weight. The instructions generally say 10 minutes, but I like to wait at least 30 minutes, sometimes an hour, just to make sure that everything inside is calmed down enough. Because once you turn and open the lid, there is a huge rush of cool air that enters into the pressure canner. And everything inside of there, all of these jars are so hot that difference in the temperature, the difference between the cold and the hot, sometimes it will create siphoning within your jars. Siphoning happens when there is a great rush of your product inside that rushes up and kind of leaks through the top of your lid and down the side. The reason why that is a problem and an issue is because then some of your bits can get stuck on the rim of your jar and prevent it from sealing. Then after it's calmed down a little bit, and you'll be able to see in your jars when they've calmed down a little bit, that's when you can take them out of the canner and put them onto the counter. Now, my jars are not hot anymore. It is the next morning. But for instruction purposes, I'm going to show you what to do. So now that everything is done and your jars have, calmed down a little bit, now you can take them out of the pressure canner. You want to pull straight up and you don't want to move them back and forth at all. And you can put them on a towel on your countertop. The towel on the countertop prevents the shock of a cold counter and the hot glass, which can cause your jars to break. And I put my jars at least 1 inch away from each other so that they can start cooling down evenly. They're going to be really hot when you take them out. Just like that. And you will want to leave them in place without touching them for at least 12 hours, 12 to 24 hours before touching them. During that time, hopefully all of your lids will seal, and a lot of times it makes a ping noise so you can hear that all of your jars are sealing. The next morning or whenever, you can take the rings off and wipe the jars down. Sometimes if they're siphoning, they'll be sticky or something. Wipe them down, label them, and then you can put them in your pantry. Well, I hope you enjoyed learning how to can ground meat. Any kind of ground meat can be canned the same way. If you're enjoying canning videos, I have a playlist for you. I've been making canning videos for about 8 years now, and so there's a bunch in our canning playlist. You guys, thank you so much for stopping by our homestead today. Take care and God bless.